Beating two teams in convincing 5v5 fashion, one of them one of the top teams in the NHL right now, I think a fellow could get used to this.
You're Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. We always love and appreciate your support and hope you will follow us along for the rest of the season. Tonight's episode got a couple of fun things to chat about. This past weekend, the Jets defeated the Pittsburgh Penguins in rather impressive fashion after doing the same thing to the Chicago Blackhawks. This time, the Jets just went to work very early against Pittsburgh and never really made it look too difficult. Then we did get some very positive injury news, some less positive injury news. Want to chat about the one in and one out that's kind of happening right now and how this could impact the upcoming Jets road trip of 6 games. Going to be a long one, so looking forward to some road hockey and a couple of big road wins for the Jets. And then finally, want to chat about the Manitoba Moose because they continue to have some very big issues. Not having the best start to the season, things haven't gotten better. And I know WHL Ball was talking about giving Morrison like 20 games. I'm starting to think you might not have much of a choice. You might have to make a move a lot sooner. There are some real stakes for this team. And also, it's not just, something that impacts the Moose, but it also kind of feeds back up to the bigger club and their potential moves at the trade deadline. So before we dive into all the fun stuff, I did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So, diving into the Jets win over the Pittsburgh Penguins, like I said, very convincing 5v5 game. This was the second straight game where the Jets actually outplayed their opponents by a pretty noticeable margin, and it started pretty early. The Jets got on the board pretty quickly, Gabriel Vilardi getting on the board just a few seconds into the game, and then not too long after, just a couple of shifts later, Brad Lambert bagging his first NHL goal ever. That's exactly the kind of thing that I think you want to see. He was put on the fourth line, and I was kind of interested to see how that would go because the fourth line has been very effective, especially at kind of crashing the corners, getting into those goal-scoring opportunities, but they haven't exactly had somebody with the sort of predatory finishing instincts of a guy like Lambert. And frankly, he just needed this really big confidence boost. Great first goal. And from there, the Jets just kind of took over. By the time everything was done and dusted, Winnipeg had won 5-2. We had the first ever that I can recall Winnipeg Jets shorthanded penalty shot goal. Yeah, if you missed that, it was very funny. Seelov's was out of the net, kind of got caught, threw his stick across the goal mouth and stopped Kyle Connor from scoring. And it was on the PK, of course. Connor had sort of stolen the puck off of Seelov's. Really bad turnover from the keeper. And Seelov's did the only thing he thought he could do. Actually, though, it's pretty illegal. And so he got awarded the penalty shot. This is, I think, KFC's first ever penalty shot goal. So that's pretty freaking cool. Not exactly something you're ever going to see. And after that, the Jets just kind of took care of business. The Pens did have a couple of decent opportunities, especially in the third period. But at that point, the Jets are already up 4-1. They're cruising to victory. This was just another game where I think Winnipeg was having a very convincing moment, especially with some interesting tweaks to the lineup. So I want to shout out one particular line that I think has started to put together some interesting results. You've got Nemesnikov, Taves, and Iafallo, and the move to get Nemesnikov back to wing, I think, has already paid very big dividends. This is already his 6th goal of the season. This one was a great feed from Taves from almost like a diagonal, and Nemesnikov got the inside step against an opposing skater and just deflected a pretty sharp angle to make it, at that point, 3-0 Jets. It was kind of a kill shot, and it certainly started to really put the pressure on the Penguins to actually show up, but at that point, it was probably too late. What I think is interesting about this trio is that you continue to see, these kind of defensive pumps put around Taves, who can do a lot of the forechecking work and stuff. Because JT still passes very well, and like I've pointed out before, the offensive zone work is still sharp. The defensive work is where he really struggles. And so having Iafallo and Nemestikov, who can actually do a lot of that stuff, but also, provide some really good two-way support on the flanks to take advantage of what Taves does best at the other end of the ice. I think it's working pretty nicely. I like it. And in this game, I thought that they were very positively noticeable. I think with JT, you have to sort of account for the foot speed and where his game is at this stage, because he can provide you some very solid value in your middle six. You just have to make sure that when you give him line mates, they're complementary. Obviously, losing Nyquist was really unfortunate, because I thought, Nyquist the past couple of games had started to look more and more confident. He was finding more and more assists on the score sheet, looked more like what you expected him to be. But then, of course, he's day to day, and we still haven't really heard a lot about that injury. So hopefully he recovers quickly. Having him in the lineup, I think, is very positive and all that. So good to see. In terms of the defense, right, there was a big change coming into this game that I wasn't really expecting, and it was that Shen came out in favor of Miller. And I know somebody on the previous episode said I was a little hard on the team and some of the players, saying the defense was a hot mess. And I think, with the past couple of games prior to this one, the blue line really was struggling. There's no other way to say it. And I think when you have 2 seventh or even 3 seventh defenders all playing pretty elevated minutes for this team, because it's not just 5v5, it's PK time too. It was putting the Jets defense in an almost unwinnable position. It really was a hot mess, for lack of a better way to describe it, though not necessarily the fault of the players. The team just doesn't have as much defensive depth right now without Sandberg. He's a key linchpin for all of their matchups, and I think it's really shown the Jets front office that they still probably need to find somebody. For this game, though, they brought in Miller, and I think that had a really profound impact in a couple of key areas. But the most important thing was that he got the puck up the ice faster, right? He got more D-zone exits, he was able to cycle it quicker, and that's just a very simple-sounding thing, but it has a huge impact on getting your forwards up, back on the counter, and into the offensive zone faster. The Jets' hot mess defense was getting Winnipeg pinned deep pretty consistently, because the Jets forwards, defensively, some of them are really strong, some of them less so. And when your blue line can't move the puck very quickly, it puts you under a lot of stress, especially when opponents start getting in your face and making your life really difficult, which is what a lot of previous opponents, even bad teams, had kind of done to Winnipeg's back end. So Miller, I thought, after a bit of a rough start, finally settled in, and by the end of the game, I thought he had a really positive impact on just keeping things simple, getting the puck out of the D zone, and keeping things cooking for a lot of the Jets forwards. He didn't really have that much of a pronounced impact on the offense, but this wasn't a game where you needed him to. So, very good stuff. Great to see the top line continuing to be a really influential force. They have been, man, just unstoppable the past couple of games. Yes, you'll look at the shot metrics and it doesn't look super pretty. I will say that right now I'm not reading a ton into it. Like, I know these lines defensively already have some issues, right? And I think it's just sort of exasperated by, the Jets defense maybe struggling at times over the past couple of weeks. But you know what? You are 9-3 right now. You feel pretty dang good. This was a very convincing win for the Jets, all around exactly the kind of victory you wanted to have at home. So good on Winnipeg, big win. Did come at a slight cost, and it was a little bit of a surprise because one of the injuries, we didn't really even see it happen. We're not even sure when it happened. So Morgan Barron, apparently got hit. We don't quite know, but, despite losing Barron, we are getting Lowry back. So this week feels already a bit of an improvement, even if it has come at the cost of Morgan Barron. We'll chat about how this is going to change some of the lines heading into a big road trip against a lot of the Pacific Division coming right up. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score to next fourth quarter comebacks. And you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. If you're a stats nerd who loves following the sport of basketball or pretty much any sport out there, including player metrics, maybe those score predictions, this is your chance to cash in with a huge win. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. While we're here, I also wanted to shout out our friends and partners at Monarch. Most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch can help itemize your spending and get a better handle on your investments portfolio. If you need to see trends or data visualizations, this is a great way to do it, and you'll never even have to touch a spreadsheet. We all hate Excel. We know it sucks. Monarch is here to help. And if you've got a partner or spouse, whether romantically or otherwise, this is a great way to share an account so you can always be on the same financial page, set goals together, and track all of your financial spending and habits in one easy spot. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's show as we are chatting a little bit about some real interesting stuff coming from Winnipeg. This is obviously a big week for Winnipeg as they are finally getting Adam Lowry back. Unfortunately, they have also lost Morgan Barron, and Barron has been described as week to week. Now, from watching the Pens game, I couldn't even find anything that looked particularly off. He had maybe one incident that Dave Minuk from Illegal Curve pointed out, but beyond that, man, I didn't even see an injury on that. So clearly something is nagging him. That's a little unfortunate. What is very happy news is that Adam Lowry is finally back. Lowry is going to play his first game of the season. It couldn't have come at a better time than the Kings. This is exactly the sort of moment where I think Adam really can come in and bring a huge defensive presence, right? Obviously, Winnipeg has needed some legitimate support, especially in the two-way game. They've been treading water the past few weeks. The past couple of games, they finally really started to get their head above water. But you're going on the road now for 6 games, long road trip. They're joking about packing underwear. Now they're packing Adam Lowry, and that is a huge deal for this team. Lowry is far and away one of the most important matchup centers, especially against opposing depth units. The Jets just don't really have many guys like him. He's just a force in possession. He's a force on defense, on the PK. I mean, he just does whatever it is you ask him to. And I think in particular, this is also going to give Taves the backup behind him that he truly needs. I think if JT gets, maybe a couple of easier shifts here and there, it might really help to expand his game. Let him feast against softer opponents. Let that line really go to work against guys who are tired because Lowry's been pounding them for the past couple of shifts. That's exactly what you want to see. And so far, with Barron out and Nyquist out, the Jets are running Connor Scheifele-Velarde, Nemesnikov, Taves, Iafallo, Niederreiter, Lowry, and Pearson, and finally Koepke, Ford, and Lambert. That's a pretty solid 4-line group. I like the 4th-line combination. It worked well enough in the first game. Don't really see a need to change it. Your top 6 has looked pretty solid so far. CSV continues to really lead the way. Nemesnikov, Taves, and Iafallo have been getting some solid chemistry. Niederreiter, Lowry, and Pearson. We'll see. I don't know if I really have been super fond of Pearson's game lately. He's not been noticeable in the positive sense. Unfortunately, he's kind of struggled, and I think, some of the decision-making and the lack of, foot speed have been a little bit of a problem. He's a smart guy, and I think, he's trying to compensate, but unfortunately, it hasn't quite been coming off. But, for Lowry to come back, that's certainly great news. You really can't be too upset about that. In fact, I don't think anyone in their right mind would be upset about Lowry returning. This will be interesting to see where his game is. We haven't really had too many guys in this franchise that have ever had hip surgery, especially, in the offseason. So this will be fascinating, right? if he's even 70 or 80%, that's going to be fantastic for the Jets. If he can get back to 90 or 100%, like he never had the surgery, fantastic, amazing, best outcome humanly possible. I'm not sure I'm putting a lot of stock into that camp just yet. That feels like a few too many eggs in one basket that I'm not quite ready to do, but I think just having him back in general is such a positive thing, right? He's your captain. He's the guy who's kind of the spirit of this team. A lot of the dudes have really been carrying the load and leadership and really leading by example the past few weeks. Now you also have the voice of your team back on the ice, able to drop the gloves, give you that physical support, and really pulverize some of those softer matchups. It's a great feeling. I don't think anyone could possibly be upset about this except opposing teams. They probably would prefer not to see Lowry steamrolling them. And it'll be fascinating to see where his game is. I would imagine for the first game, they're not going to like drive him crazy in terms of shifts and deployments. I would think Taves and Scheifele will probably eat more of those. Maybe even a couple of extra bump shifts for Ford if, Lowry is looking a little tired. He hasn't played in a long time. So this is a good opportunity for him to kind of get an opponent where the Kings are okay. They've not been great. I think as of right now, they're sitting pretty far in the middle of the pack and not really in a playoff spot at the moment. So this is probably one of the softer opponents you could get. Right now, they're just outside of a wild card spot, which I mean, 13 games into the season, are you really reading a ton into it? Probably not. LA has been conceding a lot of goals, though. They have conceded among some of the most goals in the Western Conference, which is again still early days. But I think the Kings' offense, isn't able to keep up right now. They're hovering a little over 500. They're just not that great of a team. It was always inevitable that the Kings were going to slow down. They have one of the older rosters in the league. It's kind of relying on, Kopitar and Kempe and a few other guys. And Kopitar is about to retire after this season. So clearly they've got bigger questions about the future of the team. I would not be super convinced. I would look at this game as a really good opportunity for the Jets to continue some of the strong 5v5 play that they've started to put together. They've looked more like the Jets of last year, despite the injuries. And no one's going to sit here and say, wow, they really schooled the Blackhawks. They must be a true cup contender. But I think what they did against the Penguins is a good sign that they're putting things together more and more. They're testing some new line combinations. They're finding some trios and duos that have found a little bit more steady footing. They seem, like they're getting once again some of the best hockey of Hellebuck's career. I don't even know how that's possible. I thought, this start to the year might be rough on the Jennings Trophy chances. The Jets have conceded the fewest goals of any team in the league. How about that? 30 goals, at the stage of the year where, the next closest team has already conceded 2 more goals. I know it's a really small sample size, and it sounds kind of silly to get excited about it, but I just think it shows that, Helly and Comrie have done a fantastic job. The goaltending continues to be one of this team's greatest strengths, and during the stretch where you just need to bank as many points as you humanly can, every win that you get now just cannot be overstated in importance. The team ahead of them, Colorado, is kind of coasting by on loser points at the moment. They've played really well, but they've struggled to get consistent goaltending, and some big defensive breakdowns and key moments have kind of put them a little bit within reach, right? So the Jets are in a really good spot right now. This is probably about as good of a start to the month of November as you could possibly hope for. Your captain's coming back. You still have some lingering injuries to deal with. Perfetti and Sandberg are in non-contact, and the Barron news really does suck. The week-to-week is just not what you want to hear for a guy who's been playing really great hockey at 5v5 and on the PK, but the Jets have proven time and again that they're a next man up team. They keep finding ways to make it work, and I suspect over this next road trip, that's going to be the case. I'll talk a little bit more about some interesting things to look for in this Kings game on tomorrow's show. Maybe some interesting pairings that I wasn't quite expecting. Maybe some potential shifts in how the Jets are thinking about the more healthy team as we edge closer and closer to hopefully some big returns for the Jets. But of course, amidst all of this, the farm club has not quite been doing as well. The Manitoba Moose are just scuffling. A 2-game losing streak against the Texas Stars, who are last in the Central Division, really not what you want to see. 1 goal in 6 periods, just not good enough. And I think you're going to have to start thinking about making a change a lot sooner, because there's too much at stake for both the Jets and the Moose for this to continue. We'll chat about why in just a brief moment. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Gametime comes in. It's the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I've used Gametime in the past to get Ravens playoff tickets. Literally could not be easier. No surprise fees, no hidden charges, and I got a panoramic seat view, so I actually knew what I was paying for. It was painless. The ticket delivery was super fast, and of course, you could even find some tickets, especially NHL tickets, for under $25 or any other sport that you're into. So take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us tonight's episode as we're chatting a little bit about how well the Moose, or how well the Jets have been doing, and how not great the Moose have been doing. It's been a little bit of a strange inversion of expectations. We all thought the Moose were going to be one of the best teams in the league, and it has been anything but. Meanwhile, the Jets, who are beat to heck and have kind of been really skating the line of what you would expect an NHL team to do, are 9-3, and they've actually started playing better hockey the past couple of games in a bit of a surprise here, especially against a top-ranked Penguins team. So what the heck has gone wrong for the Moose? Like, this team, unlike the Jets, really got overhauled roster-wise. There was a ton of investment into this team. They brought in guys like Clegg, Fagemo, obviously they brought in DiGiuseppe and several others. What the heck is going on with the Moose? Why are they just barely above the bottom of the Central? Having watched several of their games, and including some of this stuff against the Texas Stars, again, I just continue to come back to the fact that I don't think the coaching staff is really on the same page with these players. Some of the line combinations feel disjointed. You're putting David Gustafsson with a doer or something like that, and I get it, but sometimes it sort of feels a bit mismatched. I'd rather see guys like Barlow play with a Gus who understand, elite offensive positioning, who have that extra jump in their step to drive towards the net. Dewar's been fine, but, he's more of a solid middle six to bottom six guy, a more physical enforcery type. And so I look at this Moose team and the fact that offensively, they're not getting, a lot in front of goal. Defensively, they've had some really noticeable breakdowns. They struggle to cleanly exit the defensive zone. The cycle game is just average at best. It just feels like there's a lot that's not working for this team. Offensively, they're one of the lower scoring teams in the Western Conference. And for a team that, again, completely overhauled this entire roster and has a ton of young talent now to work with, it's just not good enough. And look, you could argue that there's a lot of newcomers and maybe that's what's happening. I would feel like I'd have some sympathy for that argument if we hadn't seen, the past teams under this coaching staff really struggle. Last year's team under Morrison was awful, almost unwatchable at times. And this team really just feels like a more talented version of the team that struggled to do much of anything last season. They skate well enough. They have some occasionally good opportunities and rush chances. And so, the Moose are for sure a bit unlucky, but you're only getting 20 goals in 10 games. That is just not acceptable. It just isn't. It doesn't matter how you slice it. You can attribute some of this to poor luck, but you have a 72-game season. You don't have that much margin for error, and to start like this could really hurt the Moose, especially, later on in the season where all these dropped points put them outside of a playoff spot. And you heard me say that this is really bad for the Jets too. partly because they need the kids to really thrive. If the Jets want to make a big move at the trade deadline, they have to have prospects who look like they're actually doing something in the pro leagues. If all of your kids are struggling and look like, they're only scoring maybe a third of a point per game, that does no one any favors. It stalls the development of the youth. It puts the Jets in a tight spot when they want to convince another team that their prospect is worth exchanging for an immediate roster upgrade. It's just not good enough. And it has ripple effects between both levels of the organization. For the Moose, there's just been too much invested into this team to get them back up to speed, to get them into a top ranking. And for the Jets, they need these kids to really thrive, not only to be potential trade options, but also to help the Jets themselves when they're either dealing with injuries or maybe looking for internal solutions to some of their scoring challenges. It's just not a good situation. And for Manitoba to be back in the same spot, I think increasingly there's just no other choice other than that you have to make a change. And it feels like maybe the whole coaching staff needs to be part of this. The special teams have not been good. The power play sucks. The PK is struggling. The 5v5 game hasn't been good enough. I really hate to say this, but I think the Jets organization is going to have to make a move sooner than later. True North, I think, brought in Morrison with the expectation of development and progress, but it just feels like Manitoba continues to stall out, and a lot of these kids that you really need to see thrive are doing anything but. In fact, any of the success that you see guys like Salamanson or Jaeger have kind of feels in spite of the overall product. The team looks disorganized, they're not playing good hockey, and they are picking up some bad habits that you do not want to see at higher levels. So it's early in the season. In an ideal world, you'd give this team more time to gel and sort things out. I don't think the Jets can afford to do that. If it gets to be another couple games and they still look like this, you probably need to make a change. It just isn't a situation that you can let go to maybe 20, 30 games and try and have, some alterations then. It might already be too late in the season for that to make, the most impact. So let me know how you're feeling about this Moose team. Do you agree with this sentiment? Do you think Morrison is maybe running out of runway here? Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, that's going to be all the time that we have. Tomorrow we'll have a pre-game ahead of Winnipeg versus LA. Should be an interesting one. Obviously the Jets lineups, I gave you some of the forwards. We'll talk about how they'll match up against the Kings offense, as well as some interesting notes from the Jets defensive arrangements. All that tomorrow, but for tonight's show, that's all the time that we have. Thanks for listening. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets, go.